I'm Jamie. This morning, I woke up to find 29 missed calls on my phone from a number in New Jersey. I sat there, gripping my cold coffee, and stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Deep down, I knew exactly who it was before even listening to the voicemails. Some memories are like dark shadows, lurking in the corners of your mind, waiting for the right moment to leap out and drag you back to the past. And just like that, I was transported back to when I was 12 years old, standing alone at Penn Station in New York City, watching the two people who were supposed to love and protect me turn my fear into a sick game. I grew up in a small town called Pine Brook, New Jersey. My parents, Richard and Linda Thompson, were well known in the community. My father was a respected lawyer, and my mother was a socialite who volunteered at local charities. To the outside world, we were the perfect upper-middle-class family. We lived in a large mansion on the outskirts of town, drove expensive cars, and always dressed to the nines. On holidays, we hosted lavish parties where everyone in town seemed to envy our life. But behind closed doors, it was a completely different story. My parents were cold and calculating. Every action of mine was scrutinized, and love was always conditional. My mother was obsessed with perfection. If I didn't get straight A's in school, I was a disappointment. If I didn't behave perfectly at social events, I was punished. My father, on the other hand, was more passive-aggressive. He would never directly tell me off but would make snide remarks that cut deeper than any physical wound. When I was 9 years old, I asked my mother if I could join the school dance team. She looked at me with disdain and said that dance was for riff-raff and that I should focus on more intellectual pursuits. She made me sit at the kitchen table for hours, studying boring legal textbooks instead of letting me follow my passion. At 11, I accidentally broke a priceless vase that my mother had brought back from one of her European trips. She was furious. She made me sleep on the cold, hard floor of the basement for a week, telling me that it would teach me responsibility. My father just watched from the stairs, not saying a word, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Art was the only thing that made me feel alive. I loved to draw landscapes, portraits, and anything that came to mind. I would spend hours in my room, lost in my own little world of colors and shapes. But even that was not safe from my parents' judgment. One day, I brought home a drawing I had done in art class, a beautiful sunset over the ocean. I was so proud of it. When my mother saw it, she sneered and said, "Is this what you've been wasting your time on? You could be using this time to learn something useful." But the final straw came when I got a B in a history class. I had studied so hard, but I guess it just wasn't good enough for them. That night, I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. Their voices were low, but I could still make out what they were saying. My mother said, "She needs a real lesson this time. Something she'll never forget." My father replied, "I'm with you. This will make her stronger." I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I had no idea what they had in store for me. The next morning, my parents were unusually cheerful. They told me we were going on a day trip to New York City. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they had finally changed. Maybe they were going to show me some love. But as we drove towards the city, I started to feel a sense of dread. My father turned the radio up really loud and sang along, acting like a completely different person. My mother kept looking back at me, asking me questions like, "Do you think you're smart enough to handle the big city? And, do you think you can fend for yourself if something goes wrong?" We arrived at Penn Station around noon. The station was huge, filled with people rushing in every direction. It was like a maze of noise and movement. My mother pointed to a large pillar near the entrance and said, "You stay right here. We're going to park the car and grab some lunch. We'll be back in 20 minutes. I was scared, but I didn't dare to say anything. I asked if I could go with them, and my father laughed so loudly that people around us stared. He said, "You're 12, not a baby. Act like it." I stood there by the pillar, watching them walk away. I kept checking the clock on the wall. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. I started to panic. I had only $10 in my pocket, no phone, and I had no idea how to get back home. I kept telling myself that they had just gotten stuck in traffic or the line at the cafeteria was long. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. As the afternoon wore on, the station got busier and louder. Every announcement over the speakers made my heart skip a beat. Every time I saw someone who looked like my parents, I would run towards them, only to be disappointed. Then, I saw our car outside. It was moving slowly past the station. I could see my parents inside. My father was driving, and my mother was in the passenger seat. They both looked straight at me. My father grinned, and my mother rolled down the window and shouted, "I bet $100 you can't find your way home. You're such a loser." Then they laughed and drove away. I stood there, frozen in shock. It was like my whole world had just shattered. I couldn't believe they had done this to me. I was so scared and alone. I started to cry, but I quickly wiped my tears away because I was so used to hiding my emotions from my parents. I tried to think of what to do. I didn't want to talk to anyone because my parents had always told me that strangers were dangerous. Finally, a kind-looking woman named Sarah, who worked at the station, noticed me. She stopped me and asked if I was okay. At first, I lied and said I was waiting for my parents. But when she asked me if I had eaten, I broke down. I told her everything. She was horrified. She immediately called the security and the police. The police were very serious. They took my statement and checked the station cameras. When they called my parents, I could hear the anger in the officer's voice. He said, "Leaving a 12-year-old child alone in a major train station is not a parenting lesson. It's child abandonment." I was taken to a social worker. She explained that I couldn't go back home right away because my parents were refusing to come back and insisting that this was a tough love approach. I was placed in a foster home with a couple named Tom and Lucy Miller. Tom was a mechanic, and Lucy was a nurse. Their house was small but warm. There were toys on the floor, pictures on the walls of their family, and a friendly dog that greeted me at the door. Lucy asked me what I liked to eat and made me a delicious meal. Tom asked me about my interests. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone actually cared about me. Over the next few days, I had to go through meetings with social workers and therapy evaluations. My parents showed up at the family court with a high-priced lawyer. They were still acting like they had done nothing wrong. My mother wore an expensive suit and pearls, as if looking good would excuse what they had done. My father crossed his arms and said that they were just trying to make me independent. But the court-appointed therapist's report told a different story. It described a long-term pattern of emotional abuse, humiliation, and neglect. I finally realized that what I had gone through was not my fault. It was abuse, plain and simple. When the judge asked if I wanted to go back home while the court monitored the situation, I said no without hesitation. My mother glared at me, and my father muttered something about ungratefulness. But I didn't care. I knew that I didn't want to go back to that house of pain. My parents were given a choice. They could go through a 2-year reunification program with strict conditions, or they could voluntarily surrender their parental rights. To my surprise, they chose to surrender. It was like they didn't even want me in the first place. The Millers adopted me. They changed my last name to Miller, and I became Jamie Miller. They supported my love for art. Tom would bring me home art supplies from work, and Lucy would take me to art galleries. They never made me feel like I had to be perfect. They loved me for who I was. I went to art school in New York City. It was strange to go back to the city where I had been abandoned, but this time it was different. I was in control. I studied hard, worked part-time at a local art studio, and slowly built a reputation as a talented graphic designer. After graduation, I got a job in Denver, Colorado. I loved the city. It was so different from Pine Brook. Here, I could be myself without any judgment. I met my husband, Jake, a software engineer, at a local art exhibition. He was kind, patient, and understood my complicated past. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony, and we adopted a rescue dog named Charlie. I blocked all of my biological parents' attempts to contact me. I changed my phone number, unfriended them on social media, and cut off all ties. For years, I was able to forget about the past. I had built a new life, a happy life, with people who truly loved me. But then, those 29 missed calls came in. I listened to the voicemail. It was from my younger sister, Lily. She sounded older and more tired. She said that my mother had advanced stage cancer and that my father had had a heart attack. Their law firm had collapsed after their bad parenting story had come out in the local news. Their so-called friends had turned their backs on them, and they were living in a run-down apartment. Lily told me that they wanted me to come back. Not because they were sorry, but because they were scared and alone. She also said that she had cut off contact with them after reading the court records. She realized that what they had done was unforgivable. I sat with this information for a long time. Jake told me that I didn't owe them anything. Lucy said that whatever I decided, it had to be for my own peace of mind. After thinking about it all night, I knew what I had to do. I flew to New York and went to the hospital where my mother was being treated. The room smelled of antiseptic and despair. My father looked old and frail, sitting by my mother's bedside. My mother tried to reach out to me and said my old name. I corrected her, "I'm Jamie Miller now." My father mumbled that they had made mistakes. I told them that what they had done was not a mistake. It was a calculated act of cruelty. I said, "You bet on my suffering. You left me alone in a strange city and laughed at my fear. You've spent years lying to protect yourselves, but now the truth has caught up with you." My mother asked for forgiveness. I told her that forgiveness was not something I could give them. I said, "You bet on whether I could find my way home." I did, but I never came back to you because I knew I didn't belong there. They both started to cry, but this time their tears didn't move me. I told them that I wouldn't be involved in their care. I said that Lily was right to protect her own children from them. I told them that my real family was in Colorado, the people who had loved me unconditionally. I stood up and said, "This goodbye happened 20 years ago. You're just the last ones to realize it." And with that, I walked out of the hospital room, never looking back. In the hospital parking lot, I felt a strange sense of release. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long was finally gone. I thought about the little girl at Penn Station, the one who had believed she was unwanted. She was wrong. She was unwanted by two damaged people, but she was worthy of all the love in the world. The family you're born into doesn't have to define you. Real love is not about tests and cruelty. It's about acceptance and support. And I've learned that walking away from those who hurt you can be the bravest and healthiest thing you'll ever do.